The story began in 1876, when a man placed 13 golden trout in a coffee pot filled with water, tied it to a horse, and carried them into the high mountains. 12 survived and were released into a body of water where fish had never existed before. The idea quickly gained support. 3 years later, 20,000 trout were placed in buckets and carried on foot nearly 15 miles into the mountains of Yosemite. At first, the work was done by miners, mill owners, and anglers. Later, government agencies officially became involved. They transformed these lakes forever. Over more than a century, tens of millions of fish were transported into the mountains, bringing life to approximately 2,500 lakes. However, most of the world knew nothing about this massive effort. That changed in 2013 when Ted Hallows, the manager of a fish hatchery in Camas, attached a GoPro to the underside of a small aircraft. The camera captured the plane descending toward a lake. The storage doors opened, and water carrying hundreds of young fish poured down onto the lake like rain. The footage quickly went viral on social media. Millions of people called it a dream job, or one of the most amazing things a government agency had ever created. First, let's address the question: why did they bring fish and release them into these lakes? As you may remember, this was a period when the United States had just come out of the war. Millions of veterans were returning home, the economy was growing, cars were becoming widely available, and more families were traveling to the wilderness areas of the American West. Fishing quickly became an important recreational activity. Stocking fish was not a new idea either, since the federal hatchery system had been operating since 1871 to replenish fish populations in rivers and lakes. The lakes of the Sierra Nevada offered beautiful scenery and cold, clear water, but they had no naturally occurring fish. Although many other creatures still lived there, and this is an important detail to remember at the time, these lakes were often viewed as unused resources. Miners wanted a source of food, anglers needed more places to fish, and mountain communities wanted to attract visitors. For these reasons, people believed they were improving nature. As a result, more than 33 million fish were released in Yosemite, while the percentage of large lakes containing fish across the Sierra Nevada increased from less than 1% to approximately 63%. As you saw in the opening, before airplanes were used, transporting fish into the mountains was a dangerous journey. The young fish were carried in coffee pots, metal buckets, or flattened milk cans strapped to the backs of horses and mules. Crews had to travel 10 to 15 miles across steep granite slopes, narrow trails, and areas with no paths at all. At night, they placed the fish containers in streams to keep the water cool and restore oxygen, but a single misstep could ruin the entire trip. Government agencies quickly expanded the operation because it both attracted tourists and reflected the belief at the time that putting fish into a lake meant bringing life to it. In 1952, Yosemite began stocking fish by airplane, allowing a single flight to reach multiple lakes and cross the mountains in just minutes. This brings us to the next question. Why do the fish not die when they are dropped from such a great height? The young fish are usually only about 1 to 3 inches long, roughly the length of a finger, and they weigh very little. Because of this, air resistance slows their fall much more than it would a heavier object. They are also released together with water, which keeps their gills wet and helps reduce some of the impact when they hit the surface of the lake. According to the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, about 95% of the young fish can survive. Many regain their balance and swim away just seconds after entering the water. The aircraft used for these missions are also not exactly like ordinary passenger planes. They are modified single-engine aircraft equipped with several separate storage compartments, allowing the pilot to release the correct number of fish into each lake. A specially designed tank behind the pilot can hold hundreds of pounds of water and up to 84 pounds of live fish, divided among 7 separate compartments. This means the 7 compartments can supply 7 different lakes during a single flight without the plane ever needing to land. Each flight can carry more than 10,000 young fish, and in one day, an aircraft can stock between 40 and 60 lakes. Before takeoff, the fish are not fed in order to reduce stress and limit the amount of waste contaminating the water inside the tank. When the aircraft reaches the correct lake, the pilot descends to an altitude of about 50 to 150 feet, opens a valve, and releases an entire compartment of fish and water in just 3 seconds. The pilot then immediately banks toward the next lake. However, these are far from easy flights. Hallows said the pilots must be highly skilled in low-altitude flying, a job that carries a very high level of risk. They operate at elevations of 12,000 to 13,000 feet, where the thin air reduces lift and makes it more difficult for the aircraft to pull out of a dive. Over more than 40 years, Hallows estimated that he had taken part in about 800 flights like these. Some flights even produced unusual incidents. On one occasion, an aircraft accidentally dropped fish all over people sitting on fishing floats in the middle of a lake. Another time, a plane returned with tree branches caught in its landing gear. Despite the danger, the method quickly proved effective. Its success helped the practice spread beyond California to Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. During a single stocking operation in 2020, helicopters in Wyoming dropped more than 30,000 fish into 26 lakes in the Bighorn Mountains. But where did they get such enormous numbers of fish? In 1882, the Utah Territorial Legislature created the position of Territorial Fish Commissioner and provided funding to build a fish hatchery. By 1899, the state's first hatchery had been established in Murray. Today, the entire program is managed by the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, commonly known as the DWR. The state operates 13 fish hatcheries and releases nearly 10 million fish into more than 1,000 bodies of water every year. Some facilities specialize in cold water species, including the Camas State Fish Hatchery featured in Ted Hallows' footage. Hallows was the supervisor of the Camas Hatchery, a facility that has been raising fish since 1928. Other hatcheries include Glenwood, Loa, and Midway, while some facilities also raise warm-water fish. These places operate like enormous biological factories. Workers collect eggs and milk from breeding fish, incubate the eggs, raise the fish through each stage of development, control disease, sort them by size, and then distribute them across the state. The species transported into the mountains are mainly brook trout, rainbow trout, brown trout, and golden trout. Brook trout adapt especially well to cold water and are the most widespread, appearing in about 51% of the surveyed fish-containing lakes in the Sierra Nevada. Rainbow trout are popular with anglers because they fight strongly when hooked, while brown trout are particularly effective predators. Golden trout, meanwhile, hold symbolic importance in California. But when these species were introduced together into lakes that had never contained fish, they quickly became a new kind of disaster, a real ecological disaster. That is what we will explore in the next section. Do you remember when we said that these lakes originally had no fish? The Uinta Mountains, the only major mountain range in the contiguous United States that runs east to west, contain more than 650 lakes located above 9,000 feet. Glaciers carved these lakes into the granite. After the ice melted, water collected in basins above waterfalls, rocky rapids, and streams that were too steep for fish to climb. Fish living downstream could not cross these barriers, so thousands of high-altitude lakes remained naturally isolated for generations. They did not lack food, and the water was not toxic. Fish simply had never had a way to reach them. But do not confuse the absence of fish with the absence of life. Beneath the crystal-clear water were algae, zooplankton, insect larvae, salamanders, tadpoles, and yellow-legged frogs. Along the shoreline, garter snakes, birds, bats, and spiders depended on the insects emerging from the lakes. The U.S. Forest Service describes these places as complete aquatic ecosystems that simply functioned without predatory fish. Some people believe birds may carry fish eggs into lakes. Although a 2020 study found that the eggs of certain carp species could survive after passing through a duck's digestive system, trout eggs are soft and extremely fragile. There is no confirmed evidence that they can reach these lakes on birds' feet, feathers, or through their digestive systems. Without human intervention, many of these lakes might still be fishless today. Their mistake at the time was seeing a lake without fish and assuming that something was missing. In reality, the absence of fish was exactly what kept this web of life in balance. Before fish stocking programs began, most of California's more than 4,000 mountain lakes were naturally fishless. After more than a century, introduced fish had appeared in approximately 63% of them. That's right, you heard correctly. These were invasive fish. If you have followed my previous documentaries, you already know that invasive species tend to adapt extremely well, reproduce quickly, and, most importantly, affect native ecosystems. These fish did exactly that. Trout hunt by sight. They quickly targeted the largest, slowest moving, and easiest to see creatures, including zooplankton, insect larvae, aquatic insects, small salamanders, tadpoles, and newly transformed frogs. Native species had almost no ability to defend themselves because they had evolved for thousands of years in lakes without predatory fish. Tadpoles often swam through open water. They were not fast enough to escape, had no powerful toxins, and had never developed the instinct to hide from a predator like trout. But if you had been standing beside one of those lakes at the time, everything would still have looked perfect. The fish grew quickly, anglers repeatedly caught healthy trout, and the program was considered a success. Meanwhile, the real changes were taking place beneath the surface. Large zooplankton disappeared first, aquatic insects gradually declined, and then tadpoles and salamanders became increasingly rare. Studies by the USGS and the U.S. Forest Service confirmed that introduced trout caused major changes in zooplankton populations, lake bottom organisms, and the distribution of amphibian species. The species hit hardest was the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog, an amphibian found only in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California and Nevada. It is easily recognized by the bright yellow coloring on its belly and the undersides of its legs and feet. In the early 20th century, these frogs were once so abundant that survey crews complained about constantly stepping on them around lake shores. The species did more than eat insects. It also served as an important food source for snakes, birds, and many other predators, helping transfer energy from the water to the surrounding land. However, its life cycle became a serious weakness. Tadpoles may need to remain underwater through several winters before transforming into frogs. Once non-native trout arrived, the fish had years to consume frog eggs, tadpoles, and young frogs. At the same time, trout occupied the deepest and most stable lakes, forcing the frogs to retreat into shallow ponds that were much more likely to dry up. The situation in Yosemite was alarming. During a survey of 2,655 lakes and ponds, the frogs were found at only 282 locations, and many of the remaining populations were extremely small. Across the Sierra Nevada, their numbers declined by more than 95%. On the 30th of June 2014, the species was officially listed as endangered under federal law. The situation is becoming even worse as the planet faces the effects of climate change. As temperatures rise, snow in the Sierra Nevada melts earlier, lakes remain covered by ice for shorter periods, and the open water season lasts longer. In some cold lakes, this may give trout more time to feed and reproduce, allowing populations that once required regular restocking to sustain themselves. However, the effects are not the same everywhere. For yellow-legged frogs, the risks are much clearer. Less snow means shallow breeding ponds may dry up before tadpoles can complete their years-long development. The frightening part is that introduced fish already occupy many of the deep lakes that hold water throughout the year. This leaves the frogs trapped in the small ponds most likely to dry out or freeze completely. National Park Service documents explain that climate change is causing these shallow ponds to disappear, reducing breeding opportunities and making the frogs more vulnerable to chytrid fungal disease. Today, Yosemite is removing fish from about 25 of its nearly 250 fish-containing lakes in an effort to bring the frogs back. But remember, not every species receives its own dedicated rescue project. There is one issue we need to address. The government did not only recently discover that non-native fish were causing harm. As early as 1924, naturalists Joseph Grinnell and Tracy Storer observed that frogs and tadpoles had nearly disappeared from lakes stocked with trout. They even warned that the fish might eventually eliminate frogs from these lakes by eating the tadpoles before they had time to complete metamorphosis. The 1963 Leopold Report concluded that introducing fish into naturally fishless waters was no longer consistent with the goal of protecting ecosystems within national parks. In 1969, the National Park Service officially adopted a policy of gradually reducing fish stocking activities. Yosemite began limiting the practice in 1972, and most lakes stopped receiving additional fish in 1975. However, it was not until early 1991 that the NPS in California reached an agreement to end the program. Today, Yosemite contains nearly 2,700 lakes, about 250 of which still have fish. Fish also remain present in approximately 800 of the park's 1,200 miles of rivers and streams. But the program continued for many more decades because this was not simply a biological decision. For anglers, these trout lakes represented a family tradition, a reason to travel deep into the wilderness, and a source of income for tackle shops, hotels, guides, and mountain communities. The system of hatcheries, aircraft, employees, and designated stocking lakes had existed for decades. People had also begun to view annual government fish stocking as something they could naturally expect. Funding made the debate even more complicated. Revenue from fishing licenses and taxes on fishing equipment was returned to the states to manage fisheries, expand public access, and maintain fishing opportunities. To date, the Sport Fish Restoration Program has provided tens of billions of dollars to state wildlife management agencies. But the United States did not completely eliminate fish stocking. Instead, many states scaled the program back to selected lakes, mainly to preserve recreational fishing opportunities while also using sterile fish. These are triploid fish. Normal fish have 2 sets of chromosomes, while triploid fish have 3. At hatcheries, immediately after the eggs are fertilized, they are exposed to high pressure for a precisely controlled amount of time, causing the eggs to retain an extra set of chromosomes. The fish still grow and feed normally, but they remain permanently sterile. Triploid fish may also grow larger because energy that would normally be used for reproduction is redirected toward growth. At the same time, native Bonneville cutthroat trout are being carefully reintroduced into waters within their historical range. California now uses triploid rainbow trout in many recreational fishing programs, and some state hatcheries also produce sterile brown trout. In Utah's high Uintas, triploid brook trout and rainbow trout have been added to the program, along with tiger trout, a sterile hybrid between brook trout and brown trout. Utah currently manages more than 1,000 lakes in this region. About 446 are stocked on a rotating schedule. 129 contain self-sustaining fish populations, and 461 are still kept fishless. As a result, aircraft still take off every summer, but the goal is no longer to place fish in every lake as it once was. Lakes are now surveyed, classified, and selected according to specific management objectives. Colorado currently operates 19 hatcheries that produce more than 90 million fish each year for the state's entire network of rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. Only a small portion of those fish are transported by aircraft to remote mountain lakes. The results appeared faster than almost anyone had expected. At Sequoia and Kings Canyon, after fish were removed from restoration lakes, tadpole density increased by an average of about 13 times, while the number of yellow-legged frogs rose by roughly 14 times. At one lake, the frog population increased by as much as 49 times. 2 restored populations later became the largest remaining populations in the Sierra Nevada. Large zooplankton began to return, insect larvae increased, and swarms of adult insects once again emerged from the water every evening. Tadpoles survived through the winter, frogs returned to breed, and frog predators such as garter snakes also had a chance to come back. USGS studies confirm that removing fish from mountain lakes can restore amphibian habitat and help these species become more resilient to a changing climate. However, not every lake recovers in the same way. Lakes located near surviving frog populations can be recolonized relatively quickly, while isolated lakes may require humans to reintroduce the frogs. If not all the fish are removed, chytrid fungus continues to spread, or the lake dries up before the tadpole's complete metamorphosis, the restoration may fail. What is important is that returning some lakes to their natural condition has not caused recreational fishing in the United States to disappear. In 2022, about 39.9 million Americans aged 16 and older still went fishing. By 2024, a report from the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation estimated that 57.9 million Americans aged 6 and older had participated in fishing, the highest number ever recorded and equal to about 19% of the population. Most importantly, in my view, the greatest success of this story is not the number of fish that were stocked or the number of lakes that were restored, but the way human thinking has changed. In the past, a lake without fish was often seen as empty and in need of improvement. Today, management agencies understand that every lake has its own ecological value. Fish are stocked only in suitable locations, after the risk of spreading and the potential impact on native species have been evaluated. In areas where recreational fishing needs to be maintained, sterile triploid fish can be used to reduce the likelihood of permanent populations becoming established. The new goal is no longer to bring fish to every lake, but to find a balance between recreation, tradition, and conservation. The 30-year plan, announced by Utah in March 2026, is clear evidence of that change. In conclusion, The story of these naturally fishless mountain lakes reveals a simple but profound truth. Nature does not always need humans to add something in order to make it complete. The first people who carried fish into the mountains did not intend to destroy the ecosystem. They believed they were creating more food, recreational opportunities, and value for the wilderness. But it took more than a century, millions of introduced fish, and the disappearance of many native species for people to understand that the absence of fish was exactly what kept these lakes in balance. What gives us hope is that the United States has not denied that mistake. Programs are being adjusted, some lakes are being restored, and nature has already begun to return. What do you think? Should lakes that were naturally fishless be fully returned to their native ecosystems, or should the tradition of fishing still be maintained in certain places? Share your opinion below, subscribe to the channel, and join us in the next stories about how humans are relearning how to live alongside nature.